Hey, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk a little bit about the Big Angry. So from about 2001 to like 2009, I had a band called the Big Angry. For the most part, we kept most of the same players. There was like a classic lineup, like of the four guys that lasted the longest, and then we got a new drummer, and then our bass player left, and then we stuck around that for like 2 years, and then Jimmy the singer and I basically would just hire people if there were projects we had to do. At that point, it just became a non-live entity. So it started with a friend of mine who later became the band's manager, Mike Bellachico. And Mikey Bells was always, really pushing me to try to get into the rock band stuff. We liked the same music. It was very cool. We always talked. He grew up in Long Island, I believe in New Hyde Park, if I'm not mistaken. And with me growing up in Boston, we grew up liking the same type of heavy stuff. And he had a friend that was a drummer that wanted to start a band, and so we talked. There was another element. There was a friend of ours that was pushing to get this singer to start a band with us. Those two elements fell through, and we ended up just becoming a four-piece. So it was myself on guitar, Pete Linebeck, who also is from the Boston area, on bass, who I've known at that point when he started playing in the band. I think we went back 10 years. I had seen him play around the Boston area with his other bands. I remember he was in a band called Restless Souls. And the drummer was a guy named Ken O'Fline, who also grew up with Mike. And our singer, Jimmy Lee, who he and I had tried to do something years earlier, and we both weren't at the same place. He was coming from a different area, and I was thinking about it differently as well. And I also then I was sidetracked because I was working with a girl singer at the time, and we were doing a lot more acoustic stuff, so my head wasn't in it. But by 2001, my head was back into it, into doing the heavy stuff again. And the reason I'm bringing this up today is I went through my computer and I found these old live recordings. And so I thought I would share the live recording, and then I thought I would share a song we did for a film that didn't make the final cut. At the last minute, the band that they initially wanted got it. But we'll get to that. So we started gigging with these four guys. We were playing all over LA. We played the Whiskey a few dozen times, the Dragonfly. We played the Troubadour. And the video I'm going to show you is going to be from CBGB's in New York. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that it was, I want to say, like December of 2002. It was I think it was like the 27th of December. It was right after Christmas. We all came home for the holiday. We played a gig in Boston before the holiday, and then after the holiday, we had this gig booked. So, and the song I'm going to show you is a song that I wrote called The New Bane. The song was written about a friend of mine who had abused a drug called Nubain, which is Nubain, as opposed to Newbane, how he spelled it, what I meant by it with the Nubain. And he was on Nubain, and then eventually he did heroin. And when I found out that that's what he was on, it was a Friday night. we had a long talk, and I told him I would teach him how to play guitar and get himself back on track. And he was all excited to come see the Big Angry's first show. It was on a Sunday night. God, I think it was at the gig on Melrose. And I called him Sunday morning to remind him, and his girlfriend had answered the phone to tell me that he passed the night before. And so a lot of the early Big Angry songs were me being angry about losing him as a guy and a waste of life. To see someone go that young, I think he was 27 at the time. And yeah, so a lot of the songs were about him. We had probably, I think, 4 or 5. We had a song called Heroin. We had a song called February. I forget the date, but it was the date of him dying, February something, 2001. The New Bane. I'm trying to think if there was another one. I know there were. I know there were more. Yeah, it's just hard for me to think about it. So anyway, so yeah, we wrote those songs about him, and then shortly after this CBGB's show, we came back to town, and there was some inner turmoil with the band. I can't remember exactly where it started. It had to do with the drumming, and we wanted it to get better. And eventually we let the drummer go. And we ended up bringing in Nick Menza from Megadeth to play drums for us. He was brought to us by my friend who was a producer, Shahar Tabachnik. And at the time I was trying to woo Joel Maitoza from 24/7 Spies, which is a band that I had mentioned in a previous video, where Joel plays on Strength in Numbers album. And I become friendly with him, and we tried to get him into the band, and Joel didn't want to come downtown. He lived in Temecula or that area. I don't know exactly where, but I thought he said the Temecula area. And we wanted to do, we were playing, we all lived on the west side, so I was in Santa Monica at the time. Jimmy was in Venice, and I think Kenny was over in Playa del Rey. But anyway, so we were all on the west side. There was no way in hell we're going to Temecula. So that was a little going back and forth. We were trying to figure out what am I saying, Kenny? Kenny wouldn't be in the band. He was getting out. But Mike was in Playa. Pete, that's who I was thinking of. So Pete, where the hell was Pete living at that time? I think Pete was in Culver City. He was in Venice for a while, but I think at this point, I think he was in Culver City or somewhere over on that side. We were all on the west side technically, so we didn't feel like going down into the Inland Empire to go have a rehearsal, to drive 2 hours in traffic when we started rehearsal. And we wanted to keep our rehearsal space or stay in the same building. And a friend of mine called me up and said Nick Menza was looking for a band. And so we said, give him a CD that we did. He heard it and was like, yeah, he wanted in. So we're like, all right, we'll try it. And in comes Nick in this rehearsal with actually, I think the first rehearsal he brought this regular drum kit, but he had a crew of guys coming in, setting them up with him, or 2 guys with him. Scotty and Gary, I believe, at the time. God, if I can remember their names. Oh, that's pretty good. So we ended up, and then we ended up working together for 2 years. And Nick sadly passed. Recently, he was playing in a band with Chris Poland, who I introduced him to while we were playing in the band, because I said to him, at the time, Chris was running downtown rehearsal, and I said, hey, Chris runs downtown rehearsal. You guys ever work together or ever talk? And he was like, no, I'd love to meet him. I was like, oh, let's go down to his office. So we went down and saw Chris Poland, and those guys talked about, Mustaine and all the Megadeth days for like 2 hours we were there. And it was sad. Eventually, he got into a band with them, which both are great guys. I love Chris. Chris is awesome, and Nick was such a nice guy, troubled but nice. Which I heard when he passed, he had was like 8 years clean, and which put him, that he was still obviously using while he was playing with us, but he was such a cool guy, and man, he had some chops on him. We had some good times. So, anyways, after he left, we we had like other people fill in. We auditioned a lot of guys. I'm only talking about drummers now. I'll get to the bass player. Actually, you know what? I shouldn't. Before Nick left, what happened was Pete was moving away, so Pete had to quit the band. So Pete was leaving the band, and we went to go find ourselves a new bass player. And we brought in a lot of guys to audition. I don't want to say people's names because they didn't get it. They didn't get the position. But it was a very, I guess at the time, if I look back, in fact, I ran into one of the guys in Malibu at a bar, and he walks up. I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, you look so familiar." When we finally figured out that we both knew each other and that he auditioned for the band, he had told me it was the hardest audition he ever did. And I was like, "Oh, okay. I guess, when I think about it, because people come in and we're like just telling them, all right, this is in a drop tuning. We're going to do it like this." And a lot of the stuff didn't have like, it was kind of like funkier grooves, even though it was still heavy. It wasn't so like pedal type of music. And a lot of the bass players that came in were like pedal type players. And I remember Nick saying there was two guys he wanted to come down, and they were friends and bigger name players. Again, I don't feel like going into all that, but they my singer, this Jimmy, just didn't feel like didn't want to make it like like a band of. He wanted it to be new, and I understood where he was coming from. Actually, I agreed with him. I shouldn't just put it on him, but he said it. He came out and said it. I don't want to be in a band where it's like we're playing with all these guys that are not necessarily washed up, but this is not their first rodeo, and he wanted it to be much more of a younger vibe. Jimmy was a great showman, crazy, and he had a very valid point, and I stood by it. We all did, and we ended up going to a bar one night called Paladino. I know I'm going long here, but whatever. We went to a bar called Paladino's in the I think it's Reseda, and we walked in, and I was like, "That's the bass player right there. That's gonna play for us." The guy's vibe. The second I heard the way he plays, it made sense. And we spoke to him, and he joined the band. I would say him and Nick didn't clash so well together. I think they respected each other. They liked each other as a player, but they didn't seem to get along, at least from my memory, in that respect. Like, I didn't think that Jason really cared for his playing much, maybe. Or, there was all kinds of... It all led downhill from there, and then... So what ended up happening was... So then, years later, when we stopped playing for a few years, and then I got a call from a friend of mine, Chris Bell, who was making a film, and he wanted to use the Big Angry in the film, and we ended up bringing in Howie Simon on bass guitar, who is a fantastic guitar player in his own right. I mean, he's probably one of the best guitar players I've ever seen. It's just great. And he came down to play bass for us, and Ray Luzier, who's now in Korn, came and played drums. And I'll put that song in there too. That was a song, we did a Genesis song for that film, but then, like I said, we ended up getting it pulled out, and Disturbed, their version, they decided that Disturbed, I guess the record, they were having problems with the releasing of it, and finally they got it. But anyways, so this is... anyways, that's the story of the Big Angry. I got a phone call from Mikey Bells, I want to say, maybe a month ago, and he's been talking to Jimmy, and we're talking about maybe resurrecting it, bringing it back, or maybe just going in the studio and banging out an album. That could be very cool. So this video was filmed by my friend Lee Carreri. He was in New York at the time we were playing, so he came down and shot a couple of videos, which was very cool. And this is the new Bane. And then after that, I'll put on the studio version, that what we did with Ray and Howie on bass. And I hope you dig it. Anyways, this is the Big Angry.
You know this song? 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Here runs not my friend these days. I love the whiskers on my face. I've got to somehow break out of this cargo. About a dirty I only used it 37 times. I like to reflect on my recent past, as much as I like to chew on last. Wash it down with ice cold time. Take the pain away right now. 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 Valley eyes, but sunny skies above me. Oh, how I wish that someday it would rain. And no one would ask whether I'm alive. I have an excuse to stay inside. My existence is barren if I'm brand new way. Take the pain away right now. Take the pain away right now. Take the pain away right now. Take the pain away. So come me, baby, like my back. Don't call me, think you can take back. Don't call me out the telephone. The lights are off, but no one's home.